riding buses and trains again, but the numbers are still the second lowest since 2010. 13 people are arrested for their suspected involvement in the scams targeting OCBC Bank customers. And in smart parenting, why primary school children are losing interest in toys at an earlier age. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story with me, Hairianto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss a single episode. Public transport ridership is recovering with 2021 seeing a 4.3% increase from 2020, thanks to relaxed COVID-19 restrictions. Buses had a bigger improvement, ridership rising by 4.5% to more than 3 million. While MRT and LRT rides were up by 4.1%. This upward trend seems to be continuing. In January 2022, bus and rail rides had a 10% jump from last year's average. But observers believe that it would take some time to go back to the all-time ridership high before the pandemic in 2019. Taxi and private hire car rides also improved last year. Taxis posted a 5.9% increase to 232,000 trips a day, and private hire cars chalked up an 8% growth to 321,000 trips. With more is our senior transport correspondent, Christopher Tan. Chris, 4.5% for bus rides from 2020, 4.1% for MRT and LRT rides. Is this an encouraging increase?
Yes, definitely an encouraging sign. And you know, at the moment, the numbers represent about 2/3 of pre-pandemic levels. But what's more encouraging are the January numbers. Bus and train rides are up 10%, a sign that this year we might see some accelerated growth.
And Chris, it will take some time for these ridership numbers to return to pre-pandemic levels. But COVID-19 has also altered work arrangements which could last beyond the pandemic. So with people possibly opting to work from home and not making their work commute, what's the impact on Singapore's public transport system?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think ridership is unlikely to return to pre-pandemic levels anytime soon, if ever. With hybrid work arrangements and unknowns like maybe another virus variant, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty. The short answer, in my opinion, would be that PT, public transport, will be underused, as you said. And what that essentially means is that there might be upward pressure on fares and on public subsidies. That cannot be helped. I think that would be the new normal. But having said that, I don't think ridership numbers need to go back to the peak that was 2019, just before the pandemic arrived. I think what we need is something around 2015, 2016 levels for, you know, the system to be financially viable as it is now. So I think there is still hope, but at the same time, it all depends on, you know, how this pandemic pans out towards the end this year, and also on other factors like how many people would actually go back to work or choose to work from home.
Chris, let's talk about taxi and private hire car rides. Those were also on the up last year, 7.2% higher than in 2020. This is better than the buses and trains. What factors could have contributed to that?
Well, I think last year, I think the economy was still pretty much locked down, for a better word. I think people at large still have not gone back to work last year. But it looks like they had made more discretionary trips. And these trips would normally be by taxis or private hire. And for buses and trains, you know, they did not grow as much because people did not get back to work. The picture is quite different in January though. If you look at January numbers last month, public transport ridership had actually grown by 10% So, as we said earlier, that points to accelerated recovery this year. But for cabs and private hire, the growth was not as high in January. Perhaps, in January, the government had actually indicated that half of those who were working from home could return to work. And I think many took the cue to get back to work. And if you go to work, normally you would take buses and trains more than cabs and private hire. And then also the surge or the arrival of Omicron in December had probably spooked people and cut down on discretionary trips. And these trips are usually done by cabs and private hire.
Thank you so much, Chris, for the perspectives. Senior Transport Correspondent Christopher Tan. Still on transport, the Straits Times understands that construction of the third and final leg of the Cross Island Line could wrap up at the end of 2033. And factoring in the time needed to test relevant systems and trains, the line's last phase will likely start operations only from 2034 or later. This is the first time an indicative date has been made public for the completion of our 8th MRT line, which will span the length of Singapore. 9 men and 4 women between 19 and 22 years old have been arrested for their suspected involvement in the recent OCBC phishing scam. The arrests occurred in an island-wide operation on February 16th and 17th, during which mobile devices, bank cards, SIM cards, 2 Rolex watches and cash amounting to some $2,700 were also seized. 7 out of the 13 arrested were charged last Friday. Overseas, US President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin have agreed in principle to a summit over Ukraine after French President Emmanuel Macron pitched it to both leaders. But this is provided that Russia does not invade Ukraine. Mr. Macron's office says the content of the discussions will have to be prepared by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov during their Thursday meeting, adding that Mr. Macron will help in the preparations. The announcement comes after a week of heightened tensions spurred by Russia's military buildup along the Ukrainian border. Changes to Singapore's foreign worker policies will impact many businesses later this year. Finance Minister Lawrence Wong on Friday announcing an increase in the minimum qualifying salary for new employment pass and S-Pass applicants. Well, let's hear what experts on the STUOB roundtable make of the adjustments.
The consistent message that the government is sending to businesses, and businesses do need to take heed, is that businesses need to continue to transform, to redesign jobs, and to ensure that they develop the local workforce and take in foreign employees more to complement the local workforce in areas where there is a skills shortage. And this could range from the higher end, like in the tech area where we face a severe shortage, but also maybe some of the mid-range jobs where they are not so popular with Singaporeans. And I think this is one area that we need to be a bit more mindful, that we do not, through increasing the qualifying salary, make it too difficult for companies that bring in particularly some of the S-Pass holders to do jobs that is needed in Singapore, but which Singaporeans are not so inclined to do.
Over the course of the last 2 years, quite ironically, things have improved because you don't get access to so much manpower. You relook at your business process, and companies have been trying to survive on just a leaner manpower structure. And that in some sense have helped. So now those measures are going to help these companies to accelerate and continue that momentum, that we can actually do more with just less. And this one does have its benefits to our own social infrastructure. I think that's quite critical. Now, your question is, can the local manpower fill up the gap? I think there will be some adjustment period. And so that's why there's certain time that's provided for the changes to happen. You do need a local manpower to train. For example, I think we're quite excited that the mid-career guys can now pivot, and they're arranging for more attachment programs for mid-career people to fill up those jobs.
As a kid, I loved playing with Lego and Play-Doh, but most kids I know these days would rather spend all day on their digital devices if they could. Experts tell ST that compared with earlier generations, primary school children are losing interest in toys at an earlier age. It's concerning because playing with toys can boost creativity and problem-solving skills, more so than online games. To encourage children to get back to their toys, how about this for an idea? The Sony Creative Science Award toy making competition for pupils from primary 1 to 6 is open for registration. It's organized by Science Centre Singapore, Sony, and supported by the Education Ministry. We spoke to one of last year's winners who came out tops with his original creation, an electrifying ride.
My invention has 3 parts to it. Firstly, it's the roller coaster. Second, it's a copper coil train. Third, it's a hydraulic lift. I had a lot of fun while making this toy. I really love to make things, although I've never tried it out. But I always think, oh, I want to make this, I want to make that. My friends thought that, wow, it was so cool. And they keep on asking me, how did you think about this? And did you do it yourself? How did you get these ideas? Where did you get it? Then they keep on telling me that, wow, it's so amazing.
I'm pleased to welcome to the show Associate Professor Lim Tit Ming, Chief Executive of Science Centre Board. Now, he believes that children should play with toys. Professor, given that we live in a digital world and kids are digital savvy anyway, how can parents get their children to play with the traditional toys instead?
Well, it is actually a very good question, given that now children are really exposed to many different kinds of digital gadgets. So getting children to switch over to physical toys will be slightly tough. However, it is all about striking a balance and letting parents and grandparents help them develop an interest in physical toys that they can enjoy playing with as much as the digital gadget. And there is actually no right or wrong answer to play with what kind of toys or what kind of toy is the best toy to pick. However, what we want to do is to let the young children be exposed to the right kind of medium, the right kind of mix of toys, be it digital or physical, to give them a holistic experience. And I personally believe that if parents give a very conducive environment for our kids to feel comfortable, to allow them to freely express, freely explore, and therefore open up their mind, whatever toys given to them will be good toys. Saying that, I personally would advocate that there is something that you cannot replace with playing with physical toys, because the tactile, the physical touch and feel, and also playing physical toys tend to have you interacting with real people around you, and not so much of just alone glued to the digital screen.
I understand that there is a competition that's going on with the Science Centre, that the Science Centre is organizing. Could you give some tips on what would make a winning entry?
Oh yes, the Science Centre has been organizing jointly with the Sony group of companies in Singapore. It is called the Sony Creative Science Awards. It is a competition that look for young inventors who would make toys out of the principle of science. And this has been ongoing for 25 years this year. This year, 2022, will be the 25th anniversary. And we want the young children to really be creative and be curious about what kind of scientific principle, be it, for example, a spring or a magnet or some kind of pendulum, lever system or the pulley system, that they could imagine the scientific principle behind, implement it, and then design and conceptualize something like a toy. And we also want them to enjoy the trial and error. The contribution towards the toy making process is something that this toy making competition also look for. And we also want to encourage the children to be actively participating. It could be, in a way, brainstorming with parents, or co-creating with a sibling. Or in some instances, we also encourage them to co-create with their school friends in class, or with someone they enjoy working with together. So it is co-creation. It's about using scientific principles. It is making something that is tangible, physical, and it's fun for learning and playing at the same time.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Lim, for setting aside time to speak with us. Associate Professor Lim Tet Meng, Chief Executive of Science Centre Board. You can read more about the topic and which toys teachers recommend for primary school children. You'll find all articles at str.sg/smartparenting. Those are our top stories for today. For more news, visit straitstimes.com and our YouTube channel for more videos. Remember, subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.